like that. Okay. The moment we've been waiting for. We're so excited. This lovely lady, she's done so much wonderful work in the spiritualist community. I met her at Institute up at Harmony Grove, where we teach, and were you on the education committee too?
Yes.
Up there?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. You're a tough bunch, they wouldn't let me in. But, but I was happy to teach, it was so fun. And it was just a wonderful energy and light that she brought wherever she went over there. Always a loving, welcoming smile. And Reverend Jane Quirin was ordained in 2003. And being a spiritualist minister makes her love every day of her life. She loves to aid people through her readings and healings. And the discovery 15 years ago that she had medical intuitive abilities has provided an avenue by which to fuel the faith level of recipients of healing. Reverend Jane has taught spiritual law, foundations of spiritualism, beginnings, mediumship classes, spirit, guided tarot, religions of the world, psychometry, progressive relaxation, guided meditation, and ministerial studies. Reverend Jane has worked as an educator in secondary schools and universities, as well as high school administrator. She has 3 children, 5 grandchildren, and is eternally grateful to walk with them in this lifetime. Let's now welcome warmly Reverend Jane Quirin.
Submitted such a big bio. Told everybody my life. Let me get this situated here. Thank you so much for permitting me to stand before you. It really is my honor. Thank you. I want to start this morning with an email that a story that I read. It's called God's Email. And if you've heard that before, God was looking down on the earth plane and he said, "Oh my, things don't look so good down there. I better send a female angel down and see what's happening." So the angel comes back and she said, "Oh, it's terrible. 95% of the people are not so good. Only 5% are good." And he said, "Oh my, I better send a male angel down." So he sends the male angel down and he comes back saying the same thing. 95% of the people are not doing well, and only 5% are really living life the way it should be lived. And so God thought, I better send that 5% an email or a letter or a note to encourage them to go on. Do you know what that email said? Then I guess none of you got it. So I would suppose that you're going through some kind of suffering for yourself, or perhaps some way in which you hurt another person, like we all do, and we hurt ourselves. So we come here in this little church for a quest to appease our suffering, to do something that will put us on the right track so that we can regain a place in life and find peace, so that we can share peace. I'm there. I've done that suffering. I lost my sister just 3 weeks ago, and she's so wonderful and went quickly. The suffering I felt personally and that which I experienced among my family members and siblings, their spouses, grandchildren, nieces and nephews, great-grandchildren. It was just awful to see their suffering. And I know, dear spiritualist colleagues and friends, you want to know, have I heard from her? Yes. Yes, I've heard from her. And it's so gratifying to get those spirit messages. I love that. I've had people tell me that they thought that they would never hear from their loved one because they had Alzheimer's. Well, my sister had memory problems too, but I assure you, she was communicating on day one, and with important messages for people that I never would have known. So they come through. But we know that if we're going to get unstuck and go through what we're going through, which is the name of my talk today, we've got to permit healing to take place. We have to be able to grant healing to others, and we have to be able to accept it for ourselves. When you offer yourself compassion for the way in which you think you have failed, then you can quickly offer compassion to others as well. When we're hurting, we have that urgent need to have our suffering disappear. And believe me, that's what God wants for you too. He doesn't want you to suffer. There's no need for it. Consequently, we have no trouble granting compassion to some people. It's ourselves we can't grant compassion to. People like Gandhi and Martin Luther King and the Dalai Lama, they could do it. I wish I could have that explicit compassion that they had, but I'm not there. I'm not there yet. I have real difficulty as I struggle with anger for the child abuser or the power mongol. You know, I want to be compassionate, but it's hard. But we can't find our own peace if we sit in judgment of others. We all know that. When we can reach that balance and realize that we can let our lives be led by ourselves, and we can grant other people the right to live their life. We can tolerate difficulties and differences without fearing for our own identity. Compassion to me is what the word is, suffering with. It is an immediate participation in the immediate suffering of another to such a degree that you forget yourself. You know, sometimes you want to be compassionate to someone, but you still have that feeling in there. True compassion is when we can forget ourselves. It means reaching out and caring for others, identifying with the homeless person or that teen that is going through a drug situation, about to commit suicide. There's a challenge to live beyond ourselves and honor the dignity and worth of others. So the first step in getting through what you're going through is to look at what is and find the good in it. Put that rejection behind you. Rejection touches every one of us. You read an account in the Bible of Samuel the prophet who sent Jesse's house, who was sent to Jesse's house by King Saul to find the future king of Israel. Jesse assembled all his sons except David, the youngest. David was of ruddy complexion and not as strong and tall as his other brothers. So he was sent to the fields to tend to the sheep. Even his brothers rejected him when they tried to bring offerings. But God knew who he wanted. and that was David. He wanted King David. David suffered rejection for many long, dark years. However, he was chosen by God to continue to grow. God didn't look at his outer self. He looked at what he knew was going inside David. He never looks at where you've been. He only looks where you're going. Digest that. If you think back on something, you think, well, I shouldn't have done that. He doesn't look where you've been. He only looks where you're going. Believe me, I know about rejection. I've been there when I wanted to just pull the covers over my head, and stay there and just say, how can this be happening to me? And yes, I've had stinky people in my life. I've had jobs that I wanted that I didn't get. At one time, I thought I would never have enough money to fully retire. Still, I had to be glad that I could still work. And I did. And now I have a home with 3 wonderful children and 6 grandchildren. And I'm retired. I've been granted a ministership, and I feel like so humble to be able to stand in the presence of God before you. So look at the positives in your life instead of looking at that thing that's in the past, and then shift into high gear and look up instead of looking down. Look up. Have you ever gone through a time in your life when you had to depend on someone else to help you get through something? It almost seems like your head's always down, looking through that phone book for that next person to call to aid you with your problem. The personnel director who has your application sitting on his desk in a pile they're not doing anything about. The lawyer who might be handling your case. A board who is making a decision whether or not to let you become a part of the organization. Doctors who hold your life in your hands. A restless spouse or mate who hold you in abeyance while they decide if they want you or they want to go. You will possibly want to call and discuss the situation every single day, but you don't want to appear needy, and so you just suffer and you worry. Guess what? You never have to do that with God. You can call God 30 times a day if you want. God has created all that is present in nature and created it with a capacity for growth. Remember, you have the capacity for growth. The trees, they go through wildfires, they go through droughts, and yet they continue to grow and maintain strength. God made us the same way. So maybe you went through a terrible separation or divorce. Maybe your experience was cancer. Maybe you lost a job, but you are still here. God will permit you to continue growing if you want. He'll give you time to rest and recoup, but He doesn't expect you to remain stagnant. You have to keep growing. Someone with whom I recently facilitated a healing in my home said, I can't even go to church without crying. And I said to them, it's okay. What better place is there to cry but in church? But look up when you're crying. Don't bury your head in your hands. Look up. None of us can heal alone. Many of us have various support systems like the 12-step programs or groups that have afflictions in common with us. But one may wrestle with separating networking with this community. I'm not talking about networking. Community is a place where people happily long to be together, not from obligation, but for the want of experiencing wellness and wholeness, to know the truth and the beauty of love, and to be connected. Ultimately, community is long and sustaining when we commit ourselves to the possibility that we can compassionately coincide with another person who understands. Think of God as your partner. As a teacher of high school students, I used to look at their little faces, even though, my last name is Quirin, and they would say, "Is that Mrs. Queer?" I'd say, "No, it has an M on the end of it. You're lucky I like you." But I'd look at their dear little faces when they were faced with a test, and their faces look so wrought with worry. They know they studied. And I used to think, God be with them, and I would send them the information that they had learned or studied. I just let it go for it. When I learned that some students who were dangerously into gangs and drugs, I always asked God to intercede. I had a narc in the classroom. He told me everybody that was doing stuff, so I had to be praying all the time. And I can't tell you all the miracles that I witnessed. It's no different now. I ask God to assist me in the healings that I facilitate or the messages that I give. I ask God to grant me healing through the passing of my sister. I miss her. I don't know why I'm still in awe at the healings He grants. He's always there. I recall way back into my 30s thinking that God was, somebody who mystically touched or blessed people with whom He worked closely, and the rest of us just had to rely on faith. I remember thinking that. Never at that time did I ever think God would permit me this ministership, to be standing so humbly before you. Never did I get the idea that He would let me work in partnership with Him. But just like when you're working with an earthly partner, sometimes that partner has 75% of the answers, and sometimes they don't. It's because we're so riddled with self-esteem. We say, "Oh, I can just handle this myself. Never mind, I don't need help. I can do it." We forget we have a partner who is so ready to step in and take 50% of your load to help you get through what you're going through. Just a couple years ago, my daughter Jennifer and her friend Stacy were at an event downtown San Diego. And they went, it was a daytime event, but when they got out, it started to get dark and they'd forgotten about that. And they could see their car down the street, but there were a bunch of young men who were shouting vulgarities at women as they went past, and it scared them. And then she remembered the prayer that I always told her to say when she was in need. You've probably heard it. The light of God surrounds me. The love of God enfolds me. The power of God protects me. The presence of God is with me. Wherever I am, God is. She said they walked right down to their car. A couple of the guys even hanging, like leaning against the fender. She said it was as though we were invisible. They stood aside. We got in our car. They never said a word to us. God is everywhere. The presence of God is with us. They called on their partner God is their partner, and he was there. He was there. There's a book called Getting Through What You're Going Through. Robert Schuller is the author. And he talks in that book about a woman who, her legs were paralyzed. And she was so sad because she loved to dance with her husband. And she could no longer dance with him. Well, he granted her that power. And she got to dance with her husband. She had a partnership with God helping her through her miracle. We choose to listen to what we want to hear. We have control over our thoughts and our actions. We can say, I'm washed up, or we can gain strength that we need to accomplish our endeavors. Ask for that strength. Whatever you're going through today, realize that God has led you into. He will get you through. You can't go back now. But he says, let me help you. Let me help you get through. It's so easy to trust that, but we don't know how the story is going to end. So that's all we can do is trust. When you're in the middle of a story, you don't get hindsight. God gives us the seed for what is. He leads us so we can get through. We can turn back in the middle, but if we do, like if you're in a desert and you get halfway there and you say, I can't go the rest of the way, it's too hot. But if you turn back, it's still going to be that hot. You can't turn back. You trust in God that God will get you through. We have a unique potential in our mind and in our spirit. It's pretty well known that we only use a small potential of our brain, but we haven't begun to even study or realize the potential of our spirit. Tomorrow is another day. It's always up to us. Speaking of tomorrow, I ask you to please reflect on this talk of how to get through what you're going through. Live positively. That's the way to begin it. Live positively. And when you're, I said possibly, that was a Freudian slip, wasn't it? Live positively. When you look down, immediately look up. Look up, thinking that God is your partner. Please think about replacing guilt with gratitude. We all do things that hurt other people. Replace that with gratitude that God gave you that chance to go through that situation so you can forgive yourself. Face your fears with faith and letting love lighten your load. Let God there be with you. Thank you for listening.